I really believe what happens 9 times out of 10 is when the man raises his standards and step up to the standards and complete them and achieve them and act like that on a daily basis, then all of a sudden they realize that they're not settling for their partner. Their partner was really settling for them. They were settling for the relationship that they were in. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Powerful Man Show. I am your host, Doug Holt, with my co-host, Tim, the Powerful Man, Matthews. Tim, how's it going, brother?
Rolled off the tongue then, didn't it? I know the past few episodes we've had a few bumps in the road with your intro, but you did well then. I liked it. Rolled off the tongue.
I always aim to make you happy, my friend.
It's a good rule to live by. Your life will be a lot happier if you live by that rule.
Awesome, Tim. Well, you had a topic that you wanted to bring to the table for this episode. Let's talk about it.
Awesome. So I put a post in the Facebook community a couple of days ago, and it said, what is the number one reason for a relationship breaking down? And a lot of the guys commented on there. I think there was 100 plus comments with all the different guys sharing their different experiences. And I looked through them, and there's a theme. There was a common thread that was appearing, and it was summed up really well in one of the comments by one of the men. And he said, "You settled in the first place." And I was like, oh, wow. He said that one thing that so many men sometimes, often, quite honestly, I think it works both ways too, often think it sometimes crosses their mind, did I settle when I married this person? And obviously you have a fantastic marriage. So, I want to bring this to the table and dissect this and pull this apart so we can really dive into the truth behind this in the hope of giving these amazing listeners some nuggets that they can take away and really make use of.
Let's do it.
So, tell me, how would you approach this then? I know we had a little bit of a chat before the episode started, and you said something that was really poignant. What did you say?
Well, first of all, thank you. Well, I've been in this situation, Tim, where I asked myself, did I settle in my marriage at one point? And to your point, my wife asked this question to herself too. As hard as that may be to believe, but what it comes down to, or what it came down to for me, and fast forward 8 years later now to working with the men that we've worked with, is it comes down to settling within yourself, right? You're settling for your standard within you as a man. You're settling for the life that you're living, and that's really what we as men are worried about. We're worried about not living up to our own potential. I posted that quote into the Brotherhood, membership group, that the definition of hell is meeting the man you could have been, right? That's the definition of hell. The man you didn't actually get to become, but you could have been this guy. And I think what we do as men in general, and I'll just speak about men, obviously, because that's what we deal with, is we're looking for something external of ourselves. Okay, I'm not fulfilled. It must be my wife. She doesn't cook or do the dishes or give me blowjobs or she doesn't have the butt as the girl does on the cover of the magazine, whatever that may be. And what's really going on is we're looking external of ourselves for places that we're settling, when the truth is we're settling within ourselves.
So true. We see it so often, don't we? When the guys come into the activation method and their relationship is struggling. We've had it so many times when, well, you probably don't know this, but I've been on enrollment conversations with the guys, and I don't know at the time, they tell me after they've joined the group, but their wife comes up to them, hands them the cards and says, "You are doing this." Because they've just reached the point in their relationship where they just cannot continue in the way that things are. So the men coming into the activation method, usually, often there's a problem in the relationship. And often as well, the men are searching outside of the relationship for something to try and satisfy them and fulfill them. And they're not then able to give it to themselves. And that projection of blaming everybody else and looking outside of themselves, like you said, then goes on to their wife. And then obviously if there's arguments going back and forth and you come home from working all day and you're tired and you're stressed and you've worked hard and you walk through the door and she just doesn't get it. She just doesn't understand how hard you've worked. And, she doesn't get that I'm doing this all for us. I'm doing this. I'm building our dream. And, all the stories that go through your head. It's quite easy for those projections to snowball. And, the biggest shifts that we see in the men that come through that activation method in their relationship is when they're really able to find that inner peace within themselves and rediscover their purpose and unlock their own personal power. Because what happens is then they take control of their lives and they rediscover how powerful they really can be. And that doesn't come from ego or force or hustle or grind. It's really from a knowing who they are and knowing what they want. And that always has a ripple effect in the relationship. So how did you shift through this in your relationship with Erin?
Great question. One is I was lucky enough to be doing the work, right? The inner work on myself during this time. We're all on different journeys and we go through this. And the reason I say this is I started to notice a pattern. When I look external of myself, I was smart enough to realize it's like looking in the mirror. There's one commonality. There's one person staring back at you. And I knew that was me. And I knew if I left this relationship or my relationship with Erin because I was settling, or the thought that I was settling at the time, I would be taking in the same baggage and the same energy and everything else into the next relationship. Mm-hmm. And once I realized, Tim, that was true, I started to look where else in my life I was settling. And I started to look at, I was settling, I wasn't traveling as much as I want to. Here I'm in a hotel right now and I just literally drove across the United States from New England to Bend, Oregon. Back then I wasn't traveling near as much as I wanted to. I wasn't taking charge or ownership in my finances, to the level that I felt I should. And so I wasn't, hell would have been for me not living up to the standard that I saw myself in, this guy that I wanted to be. And when I realized that, it kind of became one of those, situations where it's don't throw rocks if you live in a glass house. And I often, when we talk to couples and about, marriage and relationship counseling, we use the idea of, don't judge your neighbor's house, right? Clean up your side of the street first. If your house is perfect, and I mean perfect, guys, immaculate, it's edged, the swept, the house is freshly painted, the windows are sparkling clean, not a spot on them, inside is clean, everything is perfect within you, then you can look at your neighbor, right? But let's be real, that never exists. And so, Tim, that's where I started to look at, like, what are my faults? And I know this may be hard for you to understand, but I actually found a lot of faults within me. And I started working on those. And when I started working on those, my faults, all of a sudden I started realizing all Erin's greatness. And it became more and more evident that I wasn't settling. I was like, oh shit, hopefully she doesn't wake up and realize all this stuff.
Yeah, I don't know what it's like to, to explore faults. And I live in that house, that immaculate house. That's me,
Yeah.
If you've been listening to the show for a while, you'll know that I don't have any...
you are perfect.
You'll know that I'm perfect, yeah. And it's, as you say this, Doug, it's so true. When a few episodes ago, we spoke about how I was navigating my relationship growing pains. And I think one of the biggest things for me then as well was realizing that, you know what? I'm just going to repeat the same pattern with the next woman and the next woman and the next woman. Because it's got nothing to do with the relationship and everything to do with me. And the lack that I was experiencing in the relationship was really a lack that I was experiencing myself. But it was easier for me to blame the relationship because it was just easier to go there, right? It's easier to blame everything outside of ourselves and to, turn that mirror around and take ownership. And it's a tough one. It can be a a bit of a dent to the ego, if you will, especially if you're anything like, the guys that we work with who are typically, high-flying businessmen. They used to calling the shots. They used to being in charge. They used to being the man. They used to having all the answers. And all of a sudden, they're on this uncharted territory where things are not working and they don't know how to fix it. And if you are listening to this and you are resonating with this, and we said at the start, we want to give you some nuggets. I think Doug's giving you the first one there, that realizing that, first of all, it's not a problem in the marriage, or it's very unlikely there's going to be a problem in the marriage. And instead, it's a problem within yourself. And you get to look at yourself first in order to find out where you are settling in the other areas. So when you did that, Doug, after that, then what did you do?
Well, I got to work on myself. And also, Tim, it comes down to standards. Like, where are your standards within you and what you're willing to tolerate in a relationship? Because some guys are settling, quite frankly, but what they're settling for is they're settling for their own standards within themselves. And I'll share my story as well. But I think what's happening is they're settling for what they're allowing their partner, how they're allowing their partner to speak to them, how they're allowing their partner to treat them. And what we forget, guys, is we train the people around us on how we're to be treated. And said another way, if your wife is nagging you, you've trained her to be that way. For some reason, she has found that nagging you gets the end result that she wants, right? If your staff don't listen to you, you've trained them not to listen to you. Counter to that, if your staff listens to you and jumps whenever you say something, you've trained them to do that as well. So in recognizing that, whatever you're complaining about settling, you have most likely trained that person to perform in such a manner that has gotten you that end result, right? The end result you have. So for me, backing up, Tim, once I realized with my wife, I'm settling, I started to realize my faults. I really set out to list the things I didn't like, but also the things I loved about my wife. Kind of that classic, I can't think of what it's called. I'm going to call it a T-chart for some reason. But you have on the left-hand column, you have your pros, and the right-hand column, the cons, right? And I've done these in relationships before because sometimes we either always remember the bad things or always remember the good. And I started to list all her amazing qualities, right? All the amazing things that she has currently and had, at the time, of course. And looking at that, I looked at, she actually had everything that I wanted, everything. There were a few things here and there that, I didn't like or thought could be improved or at least wanted to be improved upon or things that were different than I'm used to or my expectations of what a partner or a wife, in this case, should be doing. And I use that word on purpose. And I really started to look at those from an analytical standpoint and a perspective of, okay, is this really true? It's kind of like cognitive therapy. Is this really true here of what my thoughts and actions are? And it's easy to get attracted to another woman, right? Especially a woman who possesses those traits you see missing in your partner, and then think, wow, am I settling because this other woman over here, she does that, right? And I could have that, whatever that may be. Now, again, that could be she laughs at my jokes to she'd be willing to give me massages and blowjobs all day, right? But we don't know what's on the other side of that. We don't know all the things that she may not do, right? This other woman in this case. Or we may not know all those things our current partner is doing that we just take for granted, especially if we don't realize what our love language is and what our partner's love language are, right? She could be giving me complete and total love, but I could be completely missing the reception of it or receiving of it because she may be doing it in a way that's just foreign to me. Perfect example is my wife shows love by spending time with you, right? So me in this case, spending time with me is the way that she showcases her love. It's also the way she gets it. Conversely, quality time is almost the lowest on my list. Doing things for people is high. So I'll run around the house. I'll do things. I'll fix things in the house. I'll do things to help her out. I'll work on her, her marketing for her own coaching company, everything that she's doing. And she's like, great, awesome. And then she'll just want to sit down on the couch and hang out. And I'll be like, well, what do you mean? It's horrible. And so we'll miss each other there. And so we're missing the actual unsaid communication, which can lead somebody to thinking that they're settling, even though that's not the case at all. You just have to get into awareness of what's really happening. So for me, Tim, what I did in the situation was take stock in one, all the things that I had and had to be grateful for in the relationship. And then I looked at those things that I felt that I should have that didn't, right? Those things I felt I was settling for. And so where could I take ownership for these? Where was I training my wife or my partner to treat me this way or to do these things? And do they really matter? Right? Do they really matter to me in the end game? And the answer was no. They were all just little things anyway. Those things we really complain about, just little stuff. And that's really what they were. And lastly, what I went through this process is I looked at, where was I not stepping to the line? In the Powerful Man, we talk about standards, but what we say is, where are you not stepping to the line? Where are you not stepping up? And that list was much, much longer than the list of complaints that I had from my wife. Guys, I'm interrupting this episode because I want to know, do you feel bored, burnt out, or broken? Discover the system that over 300 businessmen are using to let go of the grind, find inner peace, and unlock unlimited personal power so they can have more time, more intimacy, and better sex while living a life they love without stressing about work or feeling like a fraud. Head over to thepowerfulman.com/11 to see what this is all about. All right, let's get back to the episode.
I love it. And I'm glad that you ended on that point, because I think the biggest shift that we see for the men is when they go back home after the alpha reset. And obviously the alpha reset is all about stepping to the line, right? In day 3, vision, getting clear on what they want, feeds into what you're saying here, identifying where you're not stepping to the line. And then when they go home and they actually step to the line and take care of their side of the street without pointing blame at their wife or without even trying to change their wife, what happens? You've seen the messages we get, Doug, time and time again. We had sex 3 times on the lawn in the middle afternoon. We didn't even care about the neighbors. All sorts of crazy stories, because they rediscover that spark and that passion for one another. And it mainly comes from the guy taking care of himself, rediscovering who he is and what he wants and where he's not stepping to the line, stepping to the line. And then for the woman, that she then feels a sense of freedom where she can then be herself as well. She feels relief because finally her man is stepping up, and all of that nagging and those arguments and all the other things they may have experienced before, one, not only do they no longer stand for that and they communicate that with love, and that's sexy as hell to the woman anyway, but 2, there's much less of that anyway, because the blame game isn't going on. It's a much greater environment, energy that's been experienced between the two. So it's I always love receiving those text messages. You can guarantee after every alpha reset, there are like 5 or 6 that come through from the guys. They'll continue to come through for 2 or 3 days afterwards. It's great. I love it.
Well, absolutely. And it's interesting that you say that, Tim, because what happens for us is when we change our behaviors, magically, I say that sarcastically, but magically the people around us change. And really they're reacting to our energy. And as a man, if we're leading from the front, we're leading our family, our businesses, the people around us change. So if you were always an asshole, for example, and even if you didn't think you were, if you kind of look back at it, one way to check is how many friends do you have, right? A common complaint for men is I don't have any friends. Well, one of the reasons is you might be a jerk. You may not think you are, but maybe you think you're being sarcastic and funny or whatever it is. And really it comes down to just not being a good person. But the point being is if all of a sudden you become loving and you're nice, and like you said, they go back without judgment and do the little things, right? They didn't realize that they were leaving their underwear all over the floor and their wife was having to pick up after them like their mother. they clean these little things up, and then they really makes a drastic change in their energy, right? In their inner way. And then they notice the people around them all change. It's like this magic happens. Their whole world changes. Everybody, all of a sudden, that their wife that they were settling for becomes this, as you said, this amazing sexual goddess for them. And it's absolutely amazing. And the only thing that's changed is them. They've raised their standards, right? They stopped settling for the man that they were being and changed the way they were, which then created a space for their partner, their wife, to also change and to step into something new. And that's when we talk about at the beginning of the show, you brought up, it's my, am I settling for my wife? I really believe what happens 9 times out of 10, it's almost like a 9.8 type thing out of 10, is when the man raises his standards and steps up to it. That's a huge difference, right? You can have standards and not step up to them, but when they raise their standards and step up to the standards and complete them and achieve them and act like that on a daily basis, then all of a sudden they realize that they're not settling for their partner. Their partner was really settling for them. They were settling for the relationship that they were in, for sure, 100%. But the relationship is 3 things. It's the man, it's the woman in this case, and the third entity is the relationship as a whole, right? It could be man and man, but in this case, it's the third relationship. The relationship is what really they're settling for. It's not the partner that they're settling for.
So true. So true. And, we see it well time and time again, don't we? This also filters into the other areas of the life because, as we know, all the territories are touching, right? And often the reason why the men have wound up in the activation method in the first place, and who knows, maybe you're experiencing this too. I know this was my approach for many years, is that we had the territories flipped on the head. So the guys have focused on the business territory first. And whereas once they go through the alpha reset, business comes last. It's not that they don't strive and achieve in this area, they do. But they realize a truth about themselves that they need to focus on the first territory of self first. That's number 1. Then it's health, then it's relationships, then it's wealth, and then it's business. And by doing this, this is when they're really able to live a life, they're able to take charge of their life rather and lead their life and enjoy their success with the people they love and finally feel fulfilled without worrying about work or feeling like they don't deserve it. It's so simple when you've been through it, but looking back, it seems so simple, but it just doesn't feel like it at the time, does it? I mean, I remember when I was there, it was the relationship. I felt like that was the problem, and I was trying to fix the problem by doing more things there. But that wasn't where I needed to spend my time and energy. So, the great thing about this, like I say, guys, as well as experiencing huge changes in their relationships, they then go and experienced huge increases in profits by working less. Business runs easier. Opportunities open up for them. They lose weight. They're happier. It's just fantastic to see.
Yeah, it really is. And, it all starts out the same, Tim, when the guys come in, they go through the system, and it's really self-reflection and seeing things in different ways and doing it in a very systematic, orderly fashion. Because if not, you get caught spinning the wheels. You don't have optics on yourself. We were just talking to a man, recently who had this story about how everything was going great. Yeah, I'm doing the work. Everything's going amazing. And, all these things. I won't go into details because I don't want to call this person out personally, but they were delusional by all accounts. I mean, you could see it. Like the perception, or at least the story they were telling us about themselves, was 100% false. And I think they actually believed it. But they were wondering why everything, their relationships including, were crumbling around them. And that's where optics in somebody else really helping you out really comes in handy, because you don't know what you don't know, right? And so that common question is, Tim, I'll ask you this, but if you had the opportunity to know what Amelia really thought of you, would you want to know?
Yes.
Absolutely. We all do. But what would you, if you had the option of really knowing about yourself, about the lies you were telling yourself, the bravado, the fake truths you're telling yourself, would you want that?
For sure, yeah.
Oh, that's 10x clarity, right? On yourself, because you can't affect Amelia, your partner, but you can affect you. And it's all too often that men aren't willing to invest the time, resources into that kind of development. And it's a shame. Everybody says, yeah, absolutely. I'd love to have those optics and that insight of knowing seeing my blind spots. But all too often, men don't take the steps because they're scared. They're afraid to dedicate. It's either too much time, it's too much money, right? Or what will people think of me? It's usually one of those three things. And this falls directly into settling for your partner and settling for yourself.
Yeah, and to be fair, I can understand why they can get stuck as well. I can remember when I was there and I was afraid to ask for help because I felt like I should be able to do this. And I felt like asking for help meant I'd failed. And it meant that there was something wrong with me and I was a failure and I wasn't good enough. So, it was like, oh no, I know I need to ask for help. I know I can't do this on my own. But at the same time, I go there and I'm admitting defeat basically. But, what do you want to do? There's two types of guys. There's the guy that, goes there and realizes that asking for help isn't failure at all. It's actually success. And there's the guy that wants to continue being a lone wolf on the path on his own. And there's a guy that's coming to mind for me right now who has then gone through, I think he's been married 5 times. And each time the divorce has cost him $200,000 because he's gone through this exact scenario. He's felt like he was settling. He didn't know himself, didn't know what he wanted. And he just moved on to the next person, but took everything with him because
Expensive lesson.
You tell me. Because he never took time out to reflect and be like, holy shit, I am the common denominator here. It's so Doug, to summarize, leaving these beautiful people with 3 actionable items they can do right now, what would they be?
Well, first of all, guys, I'll say it's not your fault, right? It's not your fault if you're down this path and you're catching yourself in any of this. This is society, movies. They've made you believe in this construct, mainly so they can sell you stuff. And so it's not your fault. It's getting clarity. So what are the top 3 things? Let me think about that. The first one is get really clear on where you are, right? Get really radically honest with where you are. Second one is, what are the complaints where you think that you're settling with your partner, right? Is it just looks? Is it something else? Like, really get clear on that and ask yourself multiple times, right? I wish my wife or my partner was sexier. Okay. If she was sexier, what does that mean to you? Well, if she was sexier, then I'd want to have sex with her more. Okay. Then, go down that line of thinking. Then when you get clear on that, ask yourself if I'm asked, this is what I'll do. Flip the script. You've answered those 2 questions. The third one, if Doug interviewed my partner, what would my partner say about me and where I'm not stepping to the line? And then get clear. If the answer is your partner, if your partner wouldn't tell me anything because you're perfect, well then great, move on. But if there's things for you to work on, that's where I would focus. That's where I would focus my energy. Not on am I settling, but where can I as a man get better? And what will happen, guys, is if you can actually work on those areas, the things that you complain about your partner will disappear. Not because they've changed, and they may change. I hope they do, if they need to. But because you've changed, you've made the shifts. And that's where the magic is.
That's fantastic. I'm going to come back and re-listen to this. I love listening to our episodes. So guys, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you've taken some value from this. Please do leave us a review. We'd love to get this out to more men and even women to really help better the movement. So wherever you are, whatever you're doing, I hope you have a terrific day. Doug, thank you for your time. And we'll catch you next time, guys.